Okay, good evening. Good evening, dear friends. I'm really honored to be here with you in Davos today. And there is no better place to discuss the fate of democracy than in the House of Greece, the country which is the cradle of democracy. This year, more than half of the world's population is called to vote. And it has been described as a decisive moment for democracies worldwide. And it's a big test for all of us. Are democracies able to defend themselves and prevail, or will they allow tyrants and populists to take over? The threat to democracy can come from inside and outside. From its side, it can be corroded by undermining democratic principles and institutions. Much like termites in a wooden structure, weakening it until it collapses. Belarus was still a young democracy, and it fell victim to a power-hungry dictator. Externally, the democracies are challenged by authoritarian regimes that seek to expand their influence and undermine democratic norms. These external threats act like a storm battering against a house, trying to break through its walls. And in facing these threats, resilience and solidarity are our greatest allies. We must fight for democracy on two fronts. On the one hand, we must collectively work to strengthen democracies from within, ensuring that institutions are strong, transparent, and accountable. On the other hand, we should stay united front to fight tyranny no matter in which part of the world it appears. Because tyranny is like cancer. It grows until it is removed completely. If just one cancer cell remains, it will return with deadly force. And the cancer of tyranny must be fought, not compromised. In our region, the fate of democracy is being decided now in Belarus and Ukraine. We are defending not just our freedom and sovereignty against the imperial ambitions of Russia. We are fighting for the very values of democracy, human rights, rule of law, freedom of speech, and this fight will decide the future for all of Europe. In Ukraine, Russia fights with missiles and tanks. In Belarus, it's fighting with terror, political, and economic tools. It doesn't see Belarus or Ukraine as independent countries. In Belarus, Russia is helped by the homegrown dictator Lukashenko, who is selling our sovereignty to Putin just for the purpose of keeping power to himself and his elites. He is probably the only dictator of a kind who rejects the national identity of its people and dreams about reviving of the Soviet Union, the prison of the nations, as we call it. And Belarus is a perfect example of what might happen if you neglect democratic institutions. It has been 30 years since we had free elections in Belarus. Promising to restore so-called stability, the dictator destroyed the parliament, independent courts, and media. And my country was turned into a police state where elections turned into a ritual without meaning and real choice. In 2020, the Belarusian people rallied against injustice. After years of mismanagement, bad governance, and repressions, Belarusians demanded changes. My husband decided to challenge the dictator and ran against him, and he was immediately put in prison. And to support him, I ran instead of his place. And our message of democratic renewal resonated with our people, and they gave me a decisive victory in the election. And it was a historic moment for us. But the dictator refused to go and unleashed unprecedented terror against own people. Thousands of people were arrested. Many are kept incommunicado. I haven't heard from my husband for almost a year, and there are rumors that he is not alive anymore. And just last week, we learned that another political prisoner, Vadim Krasko, died in jail. But despite the terror, people continue to resist underground. In exile, we are building democratic institutions. We are providing assistance to all who are repressed. And the regime extended its repressions to Belarusians in exile too. They are denying consular services such as a renewal of passports. We are working on solutions for this, including a new Belarus passport to help those who might be left without valid documents. You know, we can't organize big rallies and protests in Belarus now, but we can prepare for a new window of opportunity. And I'm sure that dictatorship in our country will collapse, and we have to be ready. And therefore, we are working on reforms to make sure that dictatorship will never repeat again, to make sure that we have strong democratic institutions. We already drafted the new constitution, economic and political reforms that will help us to integrate Belarus into the European economy. I know that it sounds rather ambitious, but we have a clear vision. We want to bring Belarus back to Europe where it truly belongs. For us, only by joining the European Union can Belarus become a truly independent, prosperous, and democratic country. And here, Belarusian society will develop its full potential. I believe that Belarus can not only benefit, but also contribute a lot to the European economy and become an integral part of it. Democratic Belarus will open its market and will welcome foreign investments. And I'm sure that Belarus can be a success story of transition from dictatorship to democracy. And on this path, we rely on your solidarity, your expertise, and your readiness to act. Dear friends, as the mega election year starts, my reminder to all democratic countries will be this: cherish and defend your democracy. Our Belarusian story shows that it's easy to lose it, and it's very hard to get it back. And support those who strive for democracy, because this fight is a global one. We are in this fight together. So stand with Belarus, stand with Ukraine, and stand with democratic Belarus. Thank you for your attention, your support, and your solidarity. Thank you. I can't.
Let's see if I can get you through here. Madam President-elect. Thank you so much for your courage and your voice for all democratic societies. I think I speak for everyone here. We applaud your being here this week and applaud your courage, really, to stand up to regimes that you are standing up to. So I wanted to ask you, I'm Rhett Power from Forbes, and I wanted to ask you, what do you hope to achieve this week in Davos? It's a big week, and so much attention is being paid to Ukraine and other conflicts around the world. What do you hope to achieve this week in Davos?
You're absolutely right, Mr. Power, that now attention of democratic world is dispersed on different turbulent events in the world. But I'm representing Belarus, I'm representing Belarusian democratic forces, and my task is to attract as much attention to Belarus as possible. We are working hard to remind the world how Belarus is important for not only for regional security, but for the global security. As I said in my speech, a fight between tyranny and democracy now is on the battlefields of Ukraine and in Belarus. And it's very important to remind that everybody has responsibility now to help those who are fighting tyranny in their homes, in their houses. So I want to find new friends. We need more countries in coalition for democratic Belarus. We need new friends among investors, enterprises who can see how Belarus might be attractive for investments in the future. Now, with this dictatorship, we can't attract new enterprises, new investors, because the situation in Belarus is very unreliable. People deny to put their money into Belarus because, they might never return them back. But we want to build prosperous Belarus that will be welcoming for future investments. So, of course, I want to talk about repressions in Belarus, to remind the world about political prisoners in our country. Honestly speaking, it's so difficult now to to surprise people in bad sense of this word, because people saw atrocities in Belarus, people saw murders in Ukraine, people remember Gaza, and it looks like people already saw so much that it's difficult to astonish them with something. But it's my husband, it's my people, who are suffering in Belarus and jails at the moment. And we have to remind constantly that people are suffering. And you are, as nation, as people of democratic world, don't have right to forget about this. I understand fatigue, I understand, getting used to everything, but if you're human, you should feel our pain.
Yeah, we were talking about backstage before we came on, and I could feel your passion for this cause. But we were talking about our families, and we were talking about how hard this has been on your family. Talk about what is happening with families in Belarus right now. Is it how bad is the economy? How are they suffering? Because I think the world needs to understand how much pain that they're suffering through right now.
Actually, Belarus for many, many years hasn't even existed for the world. It just was country like a satellite of Russia, and nobody perceived Belarus a separate state, with that Belarusian nation is like separate nation. And actually only in 2020, I believe, the world discovered Belarus, and they started to learn who are those people who went to the streets just to show their determination to change the country. So, and actually, many people didn't understand why Belarusian people decided to rally against Lukashenko, actually. Because when people came to Belarus, clean streets, wonderful people, looked like people were happy. But, people just were not involved in politics because they lived in their small lives. If you were involved in politics, you became opponent to Lukashenko, you might be killed, you might be put in prison. So it was like a social contract. You don't touch Lukashenko's regime, and Lukashenko's regime doesn't touch you. But a new generation grew up in Belarus, and they had possibility to travel, to see how other countries live. They managed to educate in international universities, and they see how Belarus might be prospective. That Belarusian people could live could have much higher standards of life, because we are rather poor nation at the moment because of poor management. We have wonderful geographic position. We have natural resources. If only we had normal government who take care about prosperity of Belarus, not only just caring about their own pockets and staying in power, we really might be a very developed country. So people wanted just want to change Belarus. We want European perspectives. We don't want to be sticked with Russia for years and years ahead. We just want to choose our own future, and this is why Belarusian people rallied for back in 2020. But Lukashenko wants to be like a lifelong dictator. He pretends that Belarus is his own house, we are his slaves, and he's the only person who can decide. No, the country belongs to people, not to one person.
And one more question, and then we're going to have your team come up, and I want to get the audience involved in asking questions. How does this change? Because he has power. How does this ultimately play out? I know it's a tough question. and maybe not even a fair question, but how does this play out? How does this peaceful, or is it peaceful? How does this change? How do you move the country to that point?
Mr. Power, you said that he has power. I can't agree with you. He, for 30 years, he managed...
I set you up for that.
For 30 years, dictators usually, their power is based on their personal security apparatus, on brutality, on tyranny, on repressions, but not, their power is not supported by, is not based on support of people. So, Lukashenko now, he can, through repressions, through tyranny, suppress people. Yes, he can. He can interrogate people. He can put them in the harshest conditions in prisons. He can increase number of political prisoners in Belarus. Yes, he can. But he can never make people love him or like him. So that's why he feels very fragile. He maybe from abroad he can look like brutal person who keep people in stress, who has real power, but he is not. He is afraid of a betrayal from his own environment. He doesn't manage, to make people love him. So he's very afraid for his future, for future of his children. So and that's why people in Belarus have power. We armless, we peaceful nation who want changes for Belarus. And why Lukashenko still continues brutality in Belarus? Because he's afraid. He's afraid that if he stops repressions for one day, there will be again millions of people on the streets. That's why he intensifies his personal security apparatus, because he's afraid of people. So, Mr. Power, he doesn't have power.
Madam President-elect, thank you. I'm going to invite her team up. She's got a very talented team of advisors, and please ask questions to her and her team. And then I'm going to let you moderate who should answer and who should get involved in that question, because I don't know everybody as well. So if her team would come up. Yes. Oh, please. Yes. Now I'll moderate from over here. So who has a question? And if you guys would quickly introduce yourself.
So my name is Pavel Berster. I work for Ms. Tsikhanouskaya's deputy, and we're basically responsible for pressure on the regime, accountability on the regime, sanctions, to basically make Lukashenko pay for his crimes.
We have good sanction questions, I'm sure.
Great.
My name is Anna Matsievskaya. I'm representing today Association of Belarusian Business Abroad, the organization of which consists of Belarusian businesses which were forced to relocate from Belarus to EU. I'm a lawyer, and I will very happy to answer your questions.
And my name is Ali Selyaknovich. I am economic advisor to Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya and vice president of the Association of Belarusian Business Abroad.
Yes. What's the current presence of Western European companies and companies, sort of global companies, in Belarus right now?
Currently, very limited. It was always limited in general in terms of percentage of GDP or USD per capita. Belarus was one of the least invested country among 30 post-socialist countries. So Lukashenko's regime preferred to remain the status quo, so to keep control under the economy, including via state ownership in the economy. So there is very limited investments, and overall, apart from that, these foreign investors, many of them, they are treated as hostile. I mean, they are treated by Lukashenko as hostile companies or hostile capitals. So there are a lot of, maybe not punishments, but a lot of barriers for them to develop. For example, they cannot sell currently their shares in Belarus. In order to avoid the outflow of the capital from Belarus. And some of them might be presidents or shareholders can be arrested in Belarus for to keep them as hostages, for example, and it happened with, for example, Austrian capital, Raiffeisen, from Raiffeisen Bank. So
So you can't really use foreign businesses to put any pressure on the regime?
yes, in general, before 2020, around 50% of Belarusian economy was created by the state sector. I mean, public administration, so public services, but also state-owned enterprises. So it's a lot. It's the highest level among all European countries. And even as for the second part of the economy, so the private sector that created around 50%, many of them were developed due to their connection to the state-owned enterprises or due to their affiliation with the regime. So like proto-oligarchs, right? And the amount of foreign capital was very limited. So it's true that it's very hard today, especially today, to put pressure on the regime via international capital. And to follow up on your question, it's very important in the future it concerns not only Belarus but other countries in the world, including Ukraine, for example. If you want to defend this country, this economic sovereignty of this country, sometimes better than tanks, better than aircrafts, is to host international capital. If it's diversified, if it's really global, then this capital will also try to defend your interest and protect you from aggression from any other hostile countries.
Hi. Hello, my name is Pasha. I am from Russia, currently living in the, I guess, Russian diaspora in Tbilisi. And so my question is, on an individual level, how do you put pressure on a regime not being currently based inside that country?
Well, I think it's important to highlight that Lukashenko's committed crimes not just in Belarus. He's committed crimes in Ukraine. It's not just a domestic issue, it's an international issue. For example, what we're doing now and working together is visiting the International Criminal Court in The Hague with evidence that suggests, here's Lukashenko, here's the decrees he signed, he's directly responsible for the illegal deportation of Ukrainian children. That's what we can do. But we look at our Western allies for political will. There's only so much we can do. Now we need the political will, to start these criminal investigations. That's how you rattle the regime from within. Make them fight each other, make them worried for each other.
And I also would like to add, as a lawyer responsible also for the cases of national, international, universal jurisdiction, we have four actually ways to try to start the application and start the proceeding in Poland, and there is no at this moment political will to proceed this. And as lawyers, we need to collect all the proofs, because one day we believe that one day all of the perpetrators will be in the court, and national or international, we'll see.
Yeah, actually, accountability is one of the aspects of pressure on the regime. So our strategy is like double-folded. On the one hand, we need to create as much pressure on Lukashenko's regime as possible. Its political isolation, its economic isolation, its accountability processes. But on the other hand, that is not less important, is to strengthen civil society, strengthen people, to show Lukashenko that people is real power. That's why it's so important for us to stay united, to build democratic institutions, to build parallel power. For people who are around Lukashenko, they also see what's going on. They see that Lukashenko is unshakable, that he's isolated, that there is no future for Belarus with him, that he's selling our country, to Russia. And I told already that Lukashenko is very afraid of betrayal. He knows that people around him don't like him as well. They are in his environment because of blackmail, because of some profit, but not because they want our country to be satellite to Russia.
I think it's also Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, no. What would your advice be to, say, a Belarusian who's living outside of Belarus, to help you or to help keep pressure on the regime, just on an individual level, even though the effort may be small, but not insignificant? What would your advice be?
You know, we always say that there is no small support of Belarusian democratic forces. Just join any initiative that is close to you. Or if you can't be active, in initiatives, just supporting, if you can allow yourself to support political prisoners, small donations, or Ukrainian army, or our Belarusian military volunteers in Ukraine, or organize some cultural events on Belarus, because so many people don't even know where Belarus is. So just do small steps, join initiatives, or create something by yourself.
I can also add on this. Currently, it's very hard to work inside Belarus because regime uses torture, uses other repression methods in order to kill any grassroots, any civic society activities. But our case is that we can work outside of Belarus. We can build and develop our diaspora. After 2020 was a historical moment for Belarus. Many people in 2020 suddenly start believing in Belarus. Even people who left this country, for example, in the early 1990s when the USSR collapsed, suddenly they felt that they are not from, I don't know, Russia or USSR, but they are Belarusian, and they start acting. They start financing some initiatives. They start calling their senators or congressmen, for example, in the US and so on and so forth. So currently, this diaspora is growing, unfortunately, due to many people running out from Belarus, mainly from political reasons. And this diaspora can build schools, can build universities, online courses, can invest in businesses. And sooner or later, these people can contribute to economic transition in Belarus and to creating a prosperous country.
If I could add very, very short, I think this is very valuable time for us to be prepared for the new democratic Belarus, because it's not 1 month or 2 months of preparation. We need a time to be ready. That Belarus one day will be a country which will be ruled by rule of law. And this needs a time. So right now, Office of Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya works hard on reforms, and without that, we can't have the independent country.
From the media perspective, which is mine, I am really curious. In this day and age, it's very important to win the narrative, right? To win the social media battle, to win the story. I mean, you see how effective they were in Ukraine initially in controlling the narrative, right? And to getting this enormous international coalition of support. What is and how are you trying to win that narrative? What is the strategy? And maybe that's not a fair question. Maybe you don't want to talk about that because you want to keep that under wraps, but how do you win the narrative in this? Because it seems to me that that's a really important aspect of telling your story. It's a compelling story, but winning that international support for what you're trying to do.
I think transparency is very important here. For example, all our information, it's online, everything's accessible.
But how do you fire people up? That's great. But in this day and age, you've got to motivate people. You've got to inspire them to take action.
Motivate people, you mean our allies?
Absolutely.
Oh, honestly speaking, it's becoming very difficult because I don't remember. I had hearings. I suppose it was in UK, and one of the senators told me, "Sviatlana, we are so tired. Maybe you will inspire us." And look, you are tired. Or, all those people in Belarus, who are fighting, who really feel in constant fear that they can be detained for years and years. you have to inspire them. You have to show with your actions that you are with them, that you are supporting them, that their sacrifice is not in vain. So it was strange, but, honestly speaking, for my very short experience in politics, I understood that if there is at least one person in any organization, in any political structure that is in love with Belarus or feel the same pain as Belarusian people feel, so he will do much, much more than ordinary people. You know what is the worst thing I met during my meetings with politicians, with diplomats, is emptiness in the eyes. When you share your pain and you see that no response in the eyes, you understand that this person will not help anyhow. So that's why we want to, заразить, to infect people with virus of Belarusiness.
Oh, thank you. It feels like post-election, the entanglement, I suppose, between Lukashenko and Putin is becoming even more, right? We saw, Russian missiles placed in Belarus just last week. Where do you start in kind of disentangling that relationship once you kind of assume power? How do you begin to kind of regain that Belarusian identity that you spoke of? Where do you start in kind of putting that into practice?
Yeah, I guess I can answer your question. Definitely, we are preparing for different scenarios. And our basic scenario is the situation when Lukashenko is finally out of the game due to different reasons, but in general, he does not exist any longer in Belarus. And democratic processes started in Belarus. In this moment, he will left the country in a complete ruin, in complete despair. And once the democratic processes start, if it will go against the will of Russia, Russia has a lot of economic instruments to put pressure on Belarus. So our basic scenario is despair inside the country, but also hostile attitude of Russia. So we are preparing right now, for example, for energy, crisis plan, how to supply alternatively from Poland, from Lithuania, from Latvia by railway and by reverse pipelines. How to liberalize trade of goods and services with the European Union, sometimes unilaterally. So from one side, when EU, for example, can make it sooner than Belarus. How to cooperate faster with IMF in order to receive stabilization fund, and so on and so forth. So we are preparing for this actually scenario when we have hostile Russia and we need to make everything so that our people will not, freeze in the winter, and our businesses will work throughout the year, and they will also will be engaged more with the West.
And if I could ask just one quick follow-up, do you anticipate the transfer of power, which I expect, it won't be a smooth transition? Do you expect that to almost be a distraction from other geopolitical dynamics that are happening in the region, I guess primarily between Russia and Ukraine?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in this, so I can comment more on economy, but there are different scenarios, and our team is preparing for at least several scenarios. Some of them are more radical, some of them are smooth, but for sure, as long as Russia is strong and as long as there is war in Ukraine, it will be much harder to change the situation in Belarus.
Just to follow up on. Oh, sorry.
I had one more here, and he was next. Sorry.
I'm told that nearly 50 to 60% of the world's countries will have elections in 2024. And you said something very interesting, which is that when you convey to people a passionate view of the suffering and you find no emotion in their eyes, that it's maybe even discouraging, but it's sort of, it wakes yourself up that maybe people don't feel the empathy. On this battle between democracy and autocracy, if you can pull you out from, because you're on the front lines of this issue, but we have 50-60% of the world that's going to go through elections. Where do you see, is democracy tired? Is the West tired? Do you think that, because we are seeing authoritarian tendencies show up in the citadels of progressive liberal societies. So if you could pull away for a second from Belarus and having been on the front lines of these issues, where do you think is the larger battle between democracy being at a crossroads with authoritarianism?
And first of all, I want to answer that, of course, democracy is tired. Of course, it is tired because when you're fighting with tyrannies that don't respect any international rules or agreements or laws, it's difficult to counter, these tyrannies. We see how tyrannies are easily learned from each other. They use tools of each other. They are making coalitions, to confront democracy. And on the example of Belarus, I want to say that tyrants are usually kept on the on the long staying in power. How Lukashenko behaved. So every new politician who came to Europe, he was absolutely sure that I will re-educate Lukashenko. I will absolutely. And new politicians came and left, and nobody managed to appease dictators or to re-educate dictators. So we are calling to democratic world, don't try to appease or re-educate dictators. You have to show that democracy has teeth, you have instruments, you have decisiveness, you have boldness, you have bravery to answer. Because now what we see, Lukashenko launched tyranny against people. What was the response of the democratic world? Migration crisis, hijacking of airplane, collaboration in the war. Where is the response? So they see that they are testing democracy, how far they can go until they will see a response. So, and dictators perceive this undecisiveness and as weakness. And dictators think that democracy is weak. And task of democratic world is to show that no, democracy is not weak, but use your instruments, your institutions, your organizations effectively. Use the mandates fully. Red Cross, UN structures on human rights, they have mandate to demand access to political prisoners in Belarus. 3 years, no one was allowed. So speak loudly that we demand, not just send in these letters, countlessly, but just demand that we have mandate and we want to fulfill this mandate. So I think that democracy, of course, should, democratic organizations, institutions should have reforms because times are not conventional now. And we need non-conventional instruments to fight with dictatorship, not these old school type tools. We have to be inventive, we have to be creative because they don't take care, about democracy. They want to strengthen their power and as I said in my speech, like cancer, to invade new countries. And, democracies, as you said, some countries also now becoming partially democratic here, and they see that dictatorship can be effective. It's so easy to keep people in fear, so effective. Why should we ask people what they want? Democracy is in a huge danger. It's responsibility of every person to contribute into democracy of their countries. And when they show fatigue, when they show not interest in Ukraine, for example, it's not our war, it's their war, just you will wake up once again and you will see that tyrants already knocking your doors. And what will you do then?
I think that's a very good point because I think democracies in the United States and in Western Europe, there's a very thin line between dictatorship and democracy. And it's very easy if you don't fight for it every day for all of our countries to slip into those kind of regimes. You had a question? And
Yes.
This is going to be the last question. So
Okay, thank you so much for this. I used to, at the World Economic Forum, when I worked there, I was in charge of the engagement with all Russian, Ukrainian, and Eurasian companies, so companies from the region. Belarus was not on the radar of the World Economic Forum. And I'm wondering, to what extent is your story and your ability to kind of share the story connected to the struggle between Russia and Ukraine, so the Ukraine opposition or the Russian opposition like Navalny, that obviously gets a lot of immediate attention, also a lot of space in the recent years in the WEF agenda. So to what extent has that been kind of connected and useful, or to what extent are you like a different story? And if you could tell us also the differences, it'd be super interesting. Спасибо. Разница.
I really don't want, to compete with any opposition movements in the world. And, we are depriving regime of political space, and we are strengthening our presence of democratic Belarus in the world. You see, only last year and this year, Belarus is presented in the face of democratic forces, not like pro-regime, and we show to people in Belarus and to elites that we are power here, we are alternative power. And of course there is a difference and similarity between Russian opposition and Belarusian democratic forces, because we are not opposition. We have a legitimate leader of our movement that is recognized by the world, and we have the same aim. We are not competing now politically. All the ambitions will be shown in future, before free and fair elections. Now, all the institutions, all the organizations, initiatives, they're working together to reach the point of free and fair elections. I suppose that there is some diversity in Russian opposition. Diversity is the correct word. So they are already now, they're competing between themselves. So, maybe, this is the main difference. But of course, we have to study from each other. We have to study how to fight with dictators and tyrants. For example, recently we hold a marathon of solidarity with political prisoners. We have very lack of capacity. We don't have enough money to support political prisoners and their families. So we hold marathon of solidarity, where we gathered more than €500,000 for support for political prisoners. And it was idea of actually Russian opposition. We took this idea from them. So now we have to share, how to fight. We have different aims, but it's not only about Russian opposition. We are communicating with other democratic movements, because the world is moving forward, and we have to take the best practices from other democratic successful movements. Thank you.
Madam President-elect, thank you so much for coming to Greek House. It's been an honor to have you. I wish you the best of luck this week, to you and your team, and that you accomplish all that you want to accomplish this week. And thank you once again.
Thank you, Mr. Power.